Okay, so welcome everyone. Actually, this is probably certainly the first brown bag I've ever attended that's actually got a full house and starting on time, 1 minute late. So I think that's a record by itself. Just to say welcome to everyone. We've got actually a very ambitious schedule of presentations here today. Lots and lots of content. And I actually think about a really exciting theme and something that really we as IUCN, and by IUCN I really mean regions and global thematics of the Secretariat and our colleagues in the commissions linking with our members, have really built up from something that was only a sort of barely a notion, an idea, what, Radhika, 4 years, 5 years ago, into something where we've got real momentum now. It's been linked into international frameworks, it's been reflected in national policies. So without much ado, I will hand over to Ed, who's going to give a 5-minute introduction, and then I say we'll go into a series of regional presentations, and then we'll have hopefully we'll manage this strictly. I think everybody's under orders not to talk too long, and then we'll have time for some questions and answers. Hopefully drawing on some of the sort of the bigger lessons learned from the commonalities and differences of that experience. So Ed, across to you.
This is Stuart's and Radhika's view to try and get the last pound of flesh out of Ed before he runs away.
I keep telling Ed there's lots of pounds of flesh I'm going to get out of him before he runs away.
What are you saying about it?
And then am I trying to lose weight. As Stuart said, 7 years ago, if I'd asked anybody here, eco-DRR, they would say, eco what? I understand the eco bit, but the DRR, I have no idea. And you say disaster risk reduction, and they say, IUCN is not about disaster risk reduction. That intervening 5-6 years, we know we now are really a very central part of that. And I want to introduce a couple of the concepts just to make sure we're on the same level playing field. Many of you have heard about nature-based solutions. If you haven't, Stuart's watching and he'll get you afterwards. So eco-DRR is one of many nature-based solutions. And this is the series of this brown bag lunches. There's a whole series going on over time on different aspects of nature-based solutions. And just to make sure we understand, nature-based solutions are actions to protect, manage and restore natural or modified ecosystems. And they address various societal challenges, whether they're food security, climate security, human health, whatever. There are two sort of seminal bits of websites to look at. There's a Wikipedia website on nature-based solutions, which was done in conjunction with folk in the European office. And then there's a publication that was launched at Hawaii last year by IUCN on nature-based solutions. And the web addresses are there. So those are some of the nature-based solutions groupings. There could be various ecosystem restoration, not just forest landscape restoration. There's other forms of restoration in the world as well. Various ecosystem-related based adaptation, disaster risk reduction, green infrastructure approaches, etc. So there's a whole smorgasbord of approaches. Obviously, one of the things in IUCN we're now going to be doing is trying to frame that more coherently. So there is a set of standards that we can say, this is not nature-based solutions. Because some people, I just heard this morning, some people wanted to have palm oil as a nature-based solution. So I said, that's stretching the imagination a bit. Ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. There's a definition from PEDA in 2013. But now, in 2012-13, EcoDRR did not appear in any of the global instruments. There's nothing in the CBD, there was nothing in the disaster risk. Now, the Sendai framework has a specific quotation, mentions of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, as does the CBD. And this also acknowledges the contribution of two governments in particular. I'm sure there are others. One is Japan, who have been very active in supporting ecosystem-based approaches, as well as the German government. For those in the DRR community, this is common knowledge. This is the disaster cycle. You have, after a disaster, you have a relief, reconstruction, and then you start looking at risk reduction. We, from the eco part of the world, can engage in a range of different areas, whether it's relief, whether it's pre-planning, or whether it's risk and vulnerability assessment. We can engage in a range of areas, so keep that in mind. I'm just going to show one little diagram to show that EcoDRR is not just conservation as usual. And I'm going to, there's a protected, I'll just give an example. I know protected areas, Trevor, do contribute to EcoDRR. In this case, it's an example that might not be. There's a protected area. But the storm surge might appear as such, and it might really hurt people in that riverine area as well as along the coast. So we might start restoring, it could be mangroves, it could be coastal defenses, it could be coastal grasslands along that line. But we also might include a bit of hard infrastructure. In this case, a small seawall to start the ball game rolling. So it can be a combination. It's not just looking at green only, but it can be a combination of green and grey. Right. Now we're going to, that was just a very quick snapshot introduction. I think I did it in 5 minutes tonight. She's going to say I didn't spend too long. But what we're going to have now is presentations from the different regions on this project called Relief Kit, which is looking at biodiversity and DRR. And this is where we'll get the real, not Ed's blah blah, but the real content. Thank you very much. First, we're going to have some Latin American voices from South America.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Karen Posing. I work in the regional office of South America based in Ecuador. So I'm going to give an overview of some of the perspectives, or first how we're working on EcoDRR, and then on some of the perspectives how we can continue working with this approach. So a very short background. We're talking about South America. It has 18% of the world's population, and it's a very biodiverse region. So it has 5 hotspots. It has 5 megadiverse countries in the world, but we're also talking of a region that has a lot of cultural diversity, a lot of local and indigenous nationalities as well. All right. However, although it's a very biodiverse region, we also have a lot of threats. So either if it's deforestation, invasive species, we have mega infrastructure projects and mining activities, we have climate change. So these are all affecting our rich biodiverse region. And we also have the climate change impacts, which are already landing into the different countries. So we have, for instance, shift in the rainfall. We also have changes and mostly increases in temperatures, and this is all leading to a certain to diverse impacts. So, for instance, from the Andean melting of the glaciers, but we also have, for instance, a lot of droughts and flooding events as well. We also have a lot of risks to disasters. So I'm going to talk a little bit later on the relief kit assessment and what we have done. But basically, we're talking of a various range of risks to disasters, either from flooding, for instance, storms, landslides, extreme temperatures. We have droughts, epidemics, earthquakes, volcanic activities, and wildfires. So these all come, actually, this figure right here is from the International Disaster Database from the last 15 years. And this, of course, we're going to see from the other regions as well how this looks, but basically it's a vulnerable region to climate change and also to risk to disasters. Okay, with that very short background, this is how our regional office looks in South America. So basically, in our left, this is our our regional office, which is based in Ecuador, and this was established in 1992. So it's 20 of us working here, but there's also a country office, which is based in Brazil, and there are 6 staff there. So although it seems like a small group of people working for a very large, biodiverse, but also very risky region considering climate change and risk to disasters, we of course have a larger group of people, right? So we have all our membership, which include, for instance, 118 members, including 2 state members, 4 governmental agencies, and 94 NGOs, and of course, the several hundreds of people that are part of our of IUCN 6 commissions. Let me check. I'm okay with time. All right, excellent. So, what are we working on EcoDRR in the region? Ed already framed what this concept is, so I'm gonna jump to the different projects that have specifically this approach. So first of all, we've been working since 2013 in the Ecosystem Protecting Infrastructure and Communities project, and in the case of South America, we've been working in Chile and working at 2 levels, both at national and in a biosphere reserve. So this has had also a very strong research component, and in the case, we've been researching how is the dynamics of avalanches and the role of forests to actually be a protective barrier against these risks. We've been also working in relief kits. We're going to hear a lot of the other colleagues as well, but this has mainly focused on documenting EcoDRR experiences in the region and also looking at the different policies from the countries to see how actually this can be integrated. So we all of the regions have this regional assessment on EcoDRR, and also trying to see what are the links on how biodiversity is a relevant factor for EcoDRR. Okay, then also besides these 2 initiatives that have been working also, the research or being also policy influence and also documenting these EcoDRR experiences, we all know that EcoDRR actually can be found as a co-benefit in other initiatives that maybe have had different approaches. So for instance, EBA, ecosystem-based adaptation, is very linked to EcoDRR. So in that sense, we've been also working, for instance, in some initiatives as the Mountain EBA, which took place in Peru, and also the EBA Strategies project that is taking place right now at the moment in Ecuador. And in this case, we've been implementing EBA measures on the ground to see actually how conservation, restoration, and sustainable management can be effective as a nature-based solution, and in this case for human and ecosystem resilience, and of course, reducing risk to disasters. An important factor as well is that across all our projects, communication, capacity building, and mainstreaming and policy influence are relevant to actually have a comprehensive result. We've been also working in EBA effectiveness project, a very small project that is generating the evidence on how these EBA and EcoDRR initiatives across the world is actually working. So focusing on effectiveness of human societies, on ecosystems, on the financial effectiveness as well, and some of the political and institutional factors, actually how effective these EBA initiatives are and how we can influence policy with that as well. Going back to that we have several initiatives, so it's either water or forests or dry land. For instance, in one example, we were working on a RED Plus benefit sharing project in Peru, in San Martin region, and we see on the left, before there were all these landslides and erosions because the river banks looked like that. And after a 2-year intervention of doing riverine restoration, then we have a river bank that looks like this. very healthy, and of course, protecting against flooding. So these are some examples that we can actually find all across our different nature-based solutions in the region. Just checking. No, I have 250.
Really?
Yeah, I had it here. All right, very quickly, we also had in this regional assessment, we documented around 24 initiatives from different countries. We focused on Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. And we have, everything is documented already in this publication. But then, of course, we see all the different natural hazards and how the type of either eco-DRR or adaptation or mitigation or other conservation projects are facing these natural hazards and the different types of ecosystems. And also, we have this list of different activities that have been implemented as eco-DRR. So if you want to go more, you can read the regional assessment. Okay, so getting to the final 2 slides, some of the potential opportunities for scaling up eco-DRR in the region. So firstly, we have these specific initiatives that are setting our foundations, providing experiences, tools, and lessons learned, of course, on how we can continue implementing and integrating eco-DRR into the different regions and countries. So for instance, we have these 2 examples of EPIC and Mountain EVA. And also another thing, all the relations we have established with political partners, with implementing partners, research, academy, and community. The second point is how do we bring eco-DRR into other sectors beyond environment? It's easy to have environmental people coming to our workshops or activities, but of course bringing these sectors, planning, disaster risk reduction, having the infrastructure people as well, that is an important factor. But we have, interest from these different stakeholders, so I think that's a great opportunity. Okay, and another thing, and here in the case of Chile, for instance, in the last actions we have had, the National Office of Emergencies and the Ministry of Public Works are highly interested in continue working with this approach. So that's the way how we can actually, from the conservation side, gather more stakeholders to actually have this approach integrated. And finally, some of the replication and scaling up from the pilots. So we have this interest from government, from civil society to continue working on this. There's some good opportunities, like for instance, the Green Climate Fund and others that can actually continue, that can let us scale up this approach. And finally, I think we also have to consider these different approaches. So either if we're working on FLR, community-based adaptation, EVA, et cetera, we can always try to identify what eco-DRR activities are there. So 3 key messages. I know that we were recommended to have only 1, but I'm guessing, okay, I'm finishing. So eco-DRR is already in the region, as we're going to see in the rest of the regions. Also, there's also experiences, and sometimes it's not labeled as that, but it has been identified as a co-benefit. We need a multi-sectorial and multi-stakeholder work. So we have to integrate these other sectors in working on these nature-based solutions. And we also have to work from the perspectives of science, policy, and practice. And finally, linking these different nature-based solutions that Ed just shared with us to maximize our benefits. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jacques Sonda, responsible for planning, M&E and learning at the Regional Office of Central West Africa. And I'm pleased to share with you what we have been doing in terms of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction in the region. So first of all, I would like to let you know, for those who haven't heard about PACO, where we are, and how many we are. We are based in Burkina Faso, and we're covering 25 countries in Central and West Africa. And PACO is the emerged regional program from BRAO, the West African Regional Office, and the Central Africa Regional Office. And we are working through 4 regional thematic programs and 7 country programs with 112 members. You can see the distribution of the members here, the country, and the 6 commissions are represented in our countries, and in the countries we have the number of each commission. In terms of climate-related hazard in our region, we can distinguish 2 zones. In fact, 3 zones, but the most vulnerable zone are the Sahelian zone and the coastal zone. Of course, we have the forest zone. And you can see the country that identify as Sahelian countries, with the most hazards being the drought, flood, extreme temperatures. And in the coastal area, we are facing mostly flood and coastal erosion as climate-related hazards. So these are the case studies from the regional assessment that my colleague will come later into detail. You can see that the flood is the most frequent event in the countries and in the regions, and Burkina, Mali, and Senegal are the most affected by drought events in the regions. And this is from 19 to 2015. So in terms of the PACO activities which we believe are related to the eco-DDR, we have several projects that worked before in several countries where we interact with various stakeholders. And the first one, since we merged the 2 regions, is what we call the Mangrove Initiative in West Africa, where we interact with the Ministry of Environment, and that led to the adoption of Mangrove Charter, Regional Charter. And this charter is being mainstreamed into the Abidjan Convention. And the second one is related to protected area resilient to climate change. And some countries were involved through the Ministry in charge of environments that lead to mainstreaming climate change into biodiversity-related policies. Another one is a project that supports adaptation of forest-dependent communities, where we interact with local governments, the planners, agricultural and environmental extension services, with the objective to integrate the climate change into the local development plans. And we are partnering with the CGR Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Program that covers 5 regions in our 5 countries in our region. And we are also interacting with local governments, extension services. Here we have included a disaster risk management, because after 2 years of working, we realized that the region where we work in this project every year they have to put in place an emergency plan because of drought. And then we were very interested to have to know exactly how the disaster management organization is working in this area, and to let them know that there is another way of working for long-term results rather than for emergencies. So we have included, without calling eco-DDR, we include the DDR related organization in this project. And we have another one that are trying to let the government and the technical directorate in the region promote the sustainable land water region. So these are the 2 eco-DDR project that we recently implemented, and I will not talk too much about this because my colleague will come later on this. So in these two projects, we are able to connect with the ministry in charge of environment and DDR. And for the relief kits, we are able to organize a regional workshop that the ASRO, my colleague from ASRO talked about. And we were able to connect with the Central Africa DDR platform to raise the members' awareness on the linkages between environment and degradation and disaster. And for the EPIC, in fact, EPIC builds on what we were doing under the CCAF, and we share the same partners until now. So what we believe from the previous slide, you see that we Eco DDR require a multi-level and multi-stakeholders approach to be able to implement. And the area of interest in PACO is the coastal zone planning, where we are interacting with the UMOA, which is the Regional Economic Commission in West Africa, and we are also focusing on agricultural planning to restore the agro ecosystem and have been implementing agroforestry and other restoration system that will help the local planners and the central government to know that there are another way of doing agriculture, and there is another way of organizing the coastal area in Central and West Africa. So this is what we wanted to share with you. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, everybody. My name is Milena Berrocal. I'm a technical officer for ORMAC. ORMAC is a Mexico, Central American, Caribbean regional office. Well, we want to talk about a little about nature-based solutions in our work in the region. Well, everybody know about what is the nature-based solutions. I want to talk about that. Ecosystem-based adaptation coordination. What is use of biodiversity and ecosystem services as part of the comprehensive strategy of the help people adapt to adverse effects of the climate change. Why is important for us that? But we have in our region, for example, in Central America, we have the two of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. For example, Honduras have the #1 in the climate risk index, and Guatemala is the number 10. But we have another one, for example, Dominican Republic and Haiti. And our vulnerability is about the meteorological effects. For example, tropical storm, hurricanes, landslides, floods, and we have every year many of these activity. Okay, ecosystem-based adaptation elements respond to the threat of the climate change, help the people, and use the biodiversity and ecosystem services. I want to show you 2 examples of our work there. This is a project about adaptation and vulnerability and ecosystems. We work in all Central America. The focus is on water governance and promote and, for example, increase the knowledge in the communities and increase the knowledge in the governments too. Improve capacity against the negative effects of the climate change, improve institutional framework, and more articulate public policies. And this is our countries. For example, we have projects into the basin, for example, Guayacán River Basin, Huatan River Basin, Paz River Basin, Lempa in El Salvador River Basin, and Sixaola River Binational River Basin here. The water is a very important element for us because we are in tropical countries. We have too much rain in the year, but we need the water for the crops, for consumption, human consumption, for the industry, and many activities, many human activities. And for that reason, it's very important. But for us and for everyone in the entire world. Well, how the people, the livelihoods, especially in food security. Last year, we have a very important, very hard problem in Central America. Because we had La Niña phenomenon. And La Niña for us is no rain, and many crops was destroyed because no rain, no crops, no food. And for that reason, it's important for us the food security and link that with climate change. On the other hand, use biodiversity and ecosystem services like water, soil, air, forest, for example. This is a little project in Guatemala, the local adaptation plan, and we work, for example, in protection of rivers, agroforestry systems, and reforestation. And for the help people livelihoods, for example, water for consumption, local consumption, and wood use. And use of biodiversity and ecosystem services, improvement of the water quality. And that's very important too for the public health. Improvement of the soil quality and decrease the erosion. And to respond to climate change, for example, the floods, climate variability, and tropical storms. We are in June, and right now we have the 10 or 11 tropical storm in our region. May was a very strong month with rain, and for us it's very important take attention to the tropical storm. And well, the other example is the shea coffee in El Salvador. This project was implemented for IUCN, I think 10 years ago, and reduced the pressure of the change of land use in the south of El Salvador, in a region called Aguachapán, and combine agroforestry and integrate water management. And it's very interesting because the type of agricultural system, well, it's a great number of the insects, many of them are bio indicators and pollinators too. It's very important for the crops to have pollinators. And shea coffee plantation also provide ecosystem services, for example, to connect the protected areas with other ecosystems, other important ecosystems, and reduce the risk of erosion, landslides, and have a water source and a spring, and they serve to a small biological corridor. Sorry. This project was very important to demonstrate that kind of crop will be important for the ecosystem protector, because many people think that the crops is not good for the ecosystem, for the other ecosystem. That is true in some crops, but when you have a very good practice in the agriculture sector, that is very important to link with other ecosystem and link with the protected areas. Well, that is all. As a little explain that we have that, and this is a little example of our biodiversity. This is in the Nicaragua Lake. It's a place that has many important ecosystems and many important mangroves in the south of Nicaragua. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks for those three really interesting presentations from Sur and Paco and Ormac. We're going to take a bit of a break and have about 10 minutes of questions and answers. So maybe our three presenters could actually just come up so that you can just take, so you're on call. Just very quickly, just as there. Yeah, so Jacques, Karen, if you want to come, just come up here.
Milena, did you want to go up for questions?
Yeah, so, yeah. Just very quickly, like, just while everybody's taking, there's sort of just a couple of things that I heard really sort of jumping out from the three presentations. Number one, this real importance of actually demonstrating relevance to other sectors. We're talking about agriculture, we're talking about water supply, we're talking about engineering and infrastructure. Although, of course, everything is rooted in biodiversity. The other thing is it's about change at scale. It's not about a question of doing lots and lots of little protective projects somewhere. It's really about policy, decision support, diagnosis and knowledge, capacity building, and bringing all those together to really affect real change on the ground, change at scale. The third thing that was flagged up several times, I heard, both particularly from Karen and Jacques, was that this is already happening. There are links to other nature-based solution approaches, FLR, EBA, integrated watershed resource management. And the fourth thing was the need for multi-stakeholder engagement, obviously, and that makes sense. If we really are reaching out to different constituencies, we need to bring them on. So one actually little concluding thought I had was maybe one thing we really need to be careful of is not to get too hung up on our terminology. Because if you're talking to the Minister of Agriculture, does she or does he really care if it's EBA or DRR or FLR or blah, 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 but really what is actually going to happen? How are you helping me solve my problems? So with that, I say, you want to hear from me, you want to hear from these folks. So any questions for our presenters? Sandy?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Stuart. Hi all. I just wanted to appreciate the presentations that you all made, which was really good. And just to build up from the questions that Stuart asked, I just wanted to, get your sense based on the experiences that you've been finding from the regions, from the field, from the countries themselves, as to how salient or relevant it is on the ground to make this distinction between EBA and eco-DRR. I mean, you find that a helpful distinction to make in certain circumstances, given there may be particular constituencies of actors around these issues, or do you find that one sort of ends up becoming used in an interchangeable fashion with the other? So it would be great to hear your perspectives on that. Thank you.
I'd like to start off that, Karen.
Listen, I think it is relevant because then you, so you have, for instance, VBA, so you're working directly with the NAP process and you're building on experiences and trying to include this also in the disease, et cetera, et cetera. But having also these other things, so people are also focused on mitigation and trying to restore forests, right? So then if you can identify, for instance, in this case, eco-DRR, I think it gives a more comprehensive view of what actually, that your actions have multiple benefits. So we always talk about these multiple benefits from our nature-based solutions and co-benefits, but actually if we can identify and show that, I think it brings more relevance to our work. So, yeah.
Yes, in Central America, for example, the approach, the eco-TR is very, very new. And at this time, I think not much people understand the concept. And we try to explain, to work with the government, to work with the NGO and other people. The people know better the other approach, the ecosystem, adaptation-based ecosystem, for example, because we have a very hard effect of the climate change. But I think it's a long work. We have to work too hard and so hard and with many people, the government, private sector, agriculture sector, tourist sector, and many others. But we have a good experience at this moment.
Yeah, just to add a few words, I must say that eco-DDR is, I mean, this word, this concept is not much used in our area except for the relief regional assessment. But for the others, we use the ecosystem-based approach, management approach. And what the question that our partner raised is what the difference between what we call ecosystem-based approach and the approach that have been used to combat the desertification in Saharan countries. Like agroforestry have been used as a technology against desertification, and you have the different technology that have been used before to help Saharan population to increase the agricultural productivity. And the question is, what the difference between this and the new concept we are bringing in? And as she said, I mean, most of the time the answer is that you look at this benefits when we are using for the desertification. When we use the ecosystem approach, we look beyond the only benefits you were looking for. And then you look for multiple benefits and you document this benefit you are getting, the multiple benefits you are getting from the same technology that were used for combating desertification. So I think what we discussed this morning, to make it clear in terms of guideline or in terms of standards, we help people to use the same technology but in a different framework. The different framework, the desertification framework, and if I may say it, and the ecosystem framework, which come with a multiple benefit that we have to monitor and to document.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. I think actually maybe that's a sort of interesting. We're actually pushing this with other sectors. It's the multiple benefits that actually are. That's the key thing to really that we can help solve and support solution to different problems with because we're working with a resource that's multiple benefit, and therefore you can obviously address different solutions. Nadine.
Hi, I'm Nadine McCormick with the Business and Biodiversity Programme, so you might be able to guess the theme of my question. When we're talking about infrastructure and agriculture, I can't help also thinking that business is an actor in this too, and not just business as in big business, but also SMEs and local national companies. So I do wonder to what extent have private sector actors been involved in these multi-stakeholder approaches? Up till now, I didn't hear anything. Or maybe is there an opportunity to engage the private sector for the scale-up that you're talking about as almost champions to push these approaches through their supply chains, for example?
And very quickly, do you want to give a question, because then we'll wrap up with the panel, because Radhika's signaling to me we need to move on. So would you like to ask your question as well?
It was also in line with what Nadine has raised. I think today in the morning we discussed and we raised this comment, we made this comment several times, that this is in general a new concept, a new approach. So it's a multi-sectoral thing, and you have to really start a strategy to really mainstream what it is. But it's also relevant in the sense of internally at IUCN, how we, cuts with a lot of other topics, such as protected areas, for example, where we are hardly working in at the region, for example, in Central America and the Caribbean, but it's not really embedded. It's not. We don't make the link quite often that what we're doing there is because of,
Thanks. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to do justice to these two questions. Maybe I can pick them up later. But just very quickly, I think two things to comment on. One is the link with the private sector. We've talked about dealing with multiple stakeholders. I think this other very good question is actually how do we really optimize the strength and knowledge in everything we have from species protection or from species conservation assessments, protected area work. So could you, between the two of you, could you take that and give it 30 seconds each to answer, I'm afraid. And that's Radhika's phone, not me.
Okay. So let's say for the private sector, in our case, most of the time they are agricultural service suppliers. So they are small enterprises, input fertilizer and so on, that are involved in the process at this moment.
Yes, the private sector is very important in our countries, but not only industry. I mean agriculture and tourists and the called the transnational industries too, and try to work with them. They usually are happy to work and are happy to listen a new approach and new ideas. For that reason, I think it's very important to link this sector with the government sector and start right now.
And Karen, I'm going to ask you, will you deal with the issue of how we link in with our broader areas of knowledge and work on species and protected areas, etc.?
I would like to go to the private question. And then I don't have a for the second. But just very quickly for the private sector, because I had two examples that, for instance, in one of the EBA projects, working in a protected area, we worked with, I don't know how to say it in English, I don't think there is a word, patronato, but like a committee part of a hydropower company. So for instance, there it becomes very relevant. You need definitely your water ecosystem services. So we linked also these activities with this committee, and that's the way you can engage, but often it can be difficult as well. In the case of EPIC, on the other hand, we try to approach the people from the ski resorts, which is, let's say, small private companies, but it was very difficult to actually get their interest. So I think that's a challenge. I'm sorry, I didn't have that.
So we're not going to forget about your questions. So those who are presenting next time round, the first question we're going to deal with is actually this one of how we actually integrate into our broader body of work around protected area species, etc. Trevor, you probably want to have an input there. Can we have the other three with the schedule, please? Radhika, what's next?
Oceania, it's our and our.
Yeah. So Lillian's up. Okay.
Hello, my name is Vivian Sami, and I'm from the Oral region from Oceania. I'm the Woods and Wetlands Program Manager. This is, we had 42 staff, we now have about 36. We're based in Suva, Fiji. We have about 55 members, and we look after 23 countries, of which Australia and New Zealand are part of. This is the region. We have an ocean area of about 30 million kilometers square, and we actually have a land area of only 2% of that. In terms of risk profile, and I'll just go briefly through it because you already know that 3 of the countries in our region are actually in the top 3. And this actually means that we are the most countries at risk because almost 20 countries are considered small island development states, and therefore we are at risk mostly to flooding due to tropical cyclones, tsunamis and earthquakes. Recently, you must have heard about the tropical cyclone Winston, which was a Category 5 cyclone. That was the strongest ever in the Southern Hemisphere. And that hit Fiji and cost about $3 billion worth, which affected about 62% of the population. That was actually a major one. In terms of, just to talk about economic losses, 90 floods in 2013 costed Fiji about 244 million. That, I mean, as a small country, that is quite a substantial amount of money. And you would see that, I mean, 88% had no insurance. So so all these natural disasters are quite new now in the region, and it's actually getting worse and worse. So we try and look and identify which are the most ecosystems at risk. And in most terms, it's actually the coastal, because it's all coastal. We're surrounded by ocean. Our livelihoods are derived from the ocean. We actually have communities, and the photo below there is my father's house. And that's at lowest tide. So at the highest tide, it comes in. So, I mean, that's just to show the effect of what, climate change is happening and why nature-based solutions is very important to us. I mean, we have, of course, strong reliance on natural resources. We also have very strong communal stewardship, which in terms of we have communities that work together. They're still very much using traditional methods in preserving nature. However, the pressure and the population sizes increase has meant that they are not actually using those traditional methods as per se. They are now harvesting more than what they usually are. So even though they are aware of the effects, they have no choice because of the limited resources they have. We also have significant areas in our region of intact biodiversity and unmodified landscapes, and that's why it's so important for us at this stage, and especially as we see the other effects from climate change. From the regional assessment that was done through this Relief Kit project, we realized that we do need a lot of capacity building. We needed also to work on policies in the region. However, our leaders have already started thinking ahead because of the issues that were raised, and one of the major things that has come up with this framework for resilient development in the Pacific. From what I understand, it's one of the first in the world, and countries in the Pacific have actually gotten to this stage because of the pressures that they're going through. And this is what it is. It's an overarching regional framework where it considers climate change and disaster risk management together. It's not a funded a framework. What it actually means is that governments use this framework to access funding and access assistance. So for us as working in EcoDRR in the region, this to us is a major thing, and this is what we will use to work with governments on moving forward in this DRR, eco-DRR thing. We have in the past worked with DRR, eco-DRR, even though we never really labeled it as such. The past projects working with climate change and resilience did have eco-DRR, but it wasn't actually raised to the countries that these were the projects that they actually had eco-DRR. And so in the workshops, the regional workshop where we brought environmental people and disaster management officers to the region, they also were able to look at what projects they have and they're working on that actually is eco-DRR and EBA. But they had never thought of it as such. So I think with regards to the region, we are ahead in thinking in this approach. What we are working on it now, and what the countries have come back since then, is that they are very much interested in it. They are also pressured because of the FRDP, that regional framework, to start including eco-DRR and considering it in their future proposals. And for us, as the only one in the region now, IUCN ORO, working in the region with regards to eco-DRR, we have a challenge because we need to be able to support these countries. And one of the projects that we have in the pipeline is this Coastal Resilience Project, which is a regional project that we're working on with the South Pacific Regional Environmental Programs, PREP, which actually is to support countries to look into ways for coastal resilience. Our part in it is mostly to do with mangroves and mangrove ecosystems. And we are relying on assistance not only at a regional level, but up to headquarters and what the support would be to us, because for us as the regional people to support this eco-DRR in the region, we have very little knowledge at the moment. We've only started being introduced into this, and it has become not a challenge, but we are very enthusiastic at opportunities to be able to support the countries. The environment for funding at the moment, small island development states are actually at the forefront. Countries are coming back to us and asking, is there some guidance? Is there a tool that IUCN will be able to give us so that when we are working with donors on projects that we could start putting in eco-DRR into it, looking at it in that way, as opposed to just like, for example, Tuvalu just got a 32 million grant from GCF, and that was for putting up seawalls. There was never any consideration there about mangrove areas. They already cut down those mangrove areas because of firewood and for other uses and getting them to get access to the sea, but they didn't realize that. And now it's eaten away and they're asking for seawalls. And they're getting it. I mean, they're getting 32 million for that, and they haven't really realized that what else could they do. And it isn't too late. We actually could help them at this stage, and maybe something to think about in the future on assistance to us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Pelle Bogesson, and I'm the representative of ESARO, which is the Eastern and Southern African Regional Office. And the blue countries, that's ESARO. And it's 24 countries. We have our regional office in Nairobi, Kenya. I am based in Pretoria in South Africa. We have programmatic presence in 6 countries, around 100 staff. And ESARO was created in 2006 through the merge of Eastern African region and Southern African region. And IUCN has had presence in the region since the 60s. And these are the offices: Nairobi, Kampala, Kigali, Harare, Pretoria, and Maputo. My colleague from Maputo office was supposed to be here as well, but in the end he could unfortunately not do it. This is a picture of the Pretoria office. You can see the charming construction site in the background, which makes a lot of noise. And here's some staff from that office. And here's a picture from our regional office in Nairobi. It's a very beautiful office. And the regional assessment that was done in the Relief Kit project covers 9 countries that can be considered as particularly vulnerable. They're prone to hazards, low level of development and resilience, high biodiversity and ecosystem stressors. Criteria that was used in the selection was the level of disaster risk by World Risk Index and the level of development as measured by Human Development Index. And the green countries here are the countries that was chosen. So it was quite a good spread all over the region. And this is a table of the disasters in the region, and this is what we've been working with to find out our priorities as well. And just an example here, what we need to look at is, for example, the number of storms. If you compare these, you can find that, okay, it's South Africa and Madagascar that are the 2 most storm-prone areas. But what we need to look upon as well is compare these, because Mozambique is the most cyclone-prone country in the region, and South Africa has very low cyclone risk, actually. And in terms of total damage, it seems like South Africa is worse. But I mean, South Africa is a lot more developed than Mozambique. And what is a bit missing here is the number of casualties during these storms. And if we would have a column of that, we'd see that the number of casualties in Mozambique in these 16 storms is twice the number of the ones in South Africa. And if you look at Madagascar, which it's double the number of storms, but the casualties is 10 times. So this is something that we need to work with, and it's the disaster risk components. So it's the hazard, it's the storm, but it's also the vulnerability of the population and the exposure and the capacity to cope with the disaster. And this is a map showing where the disasters occur and where the risk areas are. And in terms of climate change, you can see the blue area here, it's where the projection said that there will be more precipitation. And the red areas down here is where it will be less. And you can think that, oh, that's good, they will get more precipitation, but the projections also say that the weather will be more extreme. We'll have more extreme events when the rain comes. And an example of that is we had a storm last week in Cape Town, and they've been having drought for 2 years. And now when the rain finally came, it caused wildfires, it caused snow in the mountain and casualties and displaced people. So that is something that we really need to address and keep in mind. So some of the key messages of the report is disaster risk profile in Eastern and Southern Africa is a combination of natural and anthropogenic hazards. That's the vulnerability and the exposure parts of the disaster risk. Current trends indicate that disasters in ESA are likely to increase in both number and impact, like the Cape Town example. And failure to address biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation will increase impact. This is, I mean, in this region, majority of the population is dependent on natural resources, so this is a very important part. And also, eco-DRR is often being applied in ESA without being specifically identified as such. Our ongoing eco-DRR initiatives in the region is, for example, a stock take-up eco-DRR projects in the region, including in Paco, to see these projects that is not labeled eco-DRR, but actually has those components, and we would like to see what experiences we could draw from those projects. We also have a concept idea of a regional mapping, where we would like to use the IUCN red list of ecosystems and combine that with disaster-prone areas. Could be done through a GIS mapping. And then when we found those focus areas, we would like to do an economic evaluation and comparison of present and future level of degradation and what restoration would imply in economical benefits and such. And this is finally to see where actions in the region should be focused. We're also working on 2 national workshops on eco-DRR, one in Mauritius and one in Madagascar, with the funding from Indian Ocean Commission. And that is to address the national priorities and what they want to work with and how they want to work with this in their work. We also have prepared a proposal during the first part of the year, which is climate resilience to climate change. It's in the coastal areas of Mozambique, and we've had support from global programs. It's Gender, RLE, Global Marine, and Eco-DRR team. So I think Nadine has left, but what we would like to do is to investigate further how we can work more collaboratively on these issues and how the global programs can help us in our Eco-DRR work. So no, she's left, so I think I'll find her later and have a meeting. We also have a drought and desertification initiative that we're working on together with SADC. Well, thank you. That's all for us in Asaro.
Good afternoon. My name is Anshuman Saikia. I work with the Asia Regional Office in Bangkok as the Regional Program Support Coordinator, working programs across Asia with program management, program development, program monitoring, etc. I'll quickly go into a few slides. First of all, an overview of Asia, which, as you know, is one of the smallest regions of the world. We account for 60% of the world's population. At the same time, we have 5 countries that are considered among the world's most mega-diverse countries. They are India, China, Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Then we have 8 areas which are classified by CPM as biodiversity hotspots amongst 35 across the world. We have a very large agglomeration of coral reefs around the Coral Triangle, which actually extends into the Oceania region, most of which is now threatened. And we have some of the highest disaster-prone countries in the world, as well as climate-affected countries, and a very high rate of species extinction, especially threats to endemic fauna and flora. At the same time, there's significant economic growth happening, which is resulting in a number of our countries actually reaching middle-income status, which creates problems of its own. But this, in turn, is actually leading to significant growth in material-related sectors, natural resource-based sectors, and significant investments in physical infrastructure, including through this new initiative launched by the People's Republic of China called One Belt, One Road, which is going to exert significant pressure on biodiversity and ecosystems. So IUCN in Asia, we actually overlap with the statutory membership region of South and East Asia, which includes 23 countries, and we can divide ourselves into 3 sub-regions. Northeast Asia, which comprises of the Northeast Asian countries of Japan, Korea, 2 Koreas, Mongolia, China. Southeast Asia, which is overlapping with ASEAN and South Asia. The membership in Asia is now 274, and it's growing very fast, and the highest rate of increase is actually in China, where we've seen significant growth of more than 100% in the last 10 years. And we have new members coming in. For example, DPRK actually has gone up just now. We have a government agency member from the from North Korea. We have state members across 14 countries, and 2 countries hopefully should be new state members by the end of the year, both in Southeast Asia. And we have commission strength of more than 2,000, primarily in the SSC, but growing in other commissions as well. And we have around 12 secretariat offices with around 275 staff across Asia in a number of countries in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and in Northeast Asia and China. So I'd like to just mention that whatever you have heard about the assessments and what were some of the recommendations and opportunities and challenges that came up in the other presentations were very much so in our case as well. We had a workshop to validate our draft report as a side event of the Asian Ministerial Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction, which was a Sendai platform related Asia implementation meeting where they adopted the Sendai Asia Regional Implementation Plan. So we got participants from both the DRR as well as environment ministries from 7 countries, and we were able to influence the text of the Sendai platforms, Sendai Asia Implementation Plan. As the meeting was in Delhi, the Delhi Declaration, which made explicit reference to ecosystem-based approaches, and specifically in the context of transboundary collaboration. So 2 strategic entry points that we identified in our report, which were reaffirmed in our workshop by our participants, was one being an entry point in terms of reframing DRR concepts with ecosystem-based approaches, understanding the benefits of natural infrastructure equally to that of structural infrastructure in terms of addressing disaster risk reduction. The second one, which is missing from the slide, seems to be missing here, was applying eco-DRR to integrate between the SDGs. So if you look at especially 1, 2, 5, 6, 13, 14, 15, which are more relevant to IUCN, eco-DRR, because we worked at the landscape and seascape level, mostly integrated ecosystem management, can actually help us achieve or integrate across SDGs. And our new program, in fact, with its targets and indicators, can actually help us offer that as a proposition to countries. Now I'll go into 3 or 4 slides on a very project which some of you might be aware of called Mangroves for the Future, which could be viewed as an initiative, if it was designed now, could have taken into account those 2 strategic entry points. As a lot of you are aware, including probably colleagues from Ramsar, that MFF was developed after the Indian Ocean tsunami as an initiative to build back better, arguing that natural infrastructure was as important as building shelters or building other forms of structural infrastructure. At the regional level, Mangroves for the Future is governed by a steering committee, and then we have national coordinating bodies, which are multi-stakeholder bodies across 11 MFF countries. In total, 250 regional and national partners, a lot of them being IUCN members, both state and NGO. MFF is working towards promoting transformative adaptation and building resilience of ecosystem-dependent coastal communities. Till date has implemented more than 350 projects and interventions with focus on knowledge empowerment and governance, and has actually covered an area of around 75,000 square kilometers. MFF interventions have had a significant focus on gender equality and has led to empowerment of more than 400,000 men and women, equally so. Now I'd like to give a few examples of policy influencing. One of the areas where MFF has actually demonstrated policy influence is on co-management and benefit sharing models being adopted across countries, which were initially demonstrated through MFF small grant projects or large grant projects. An example is from Vietnam, Suan Thuy National Park, where MFF piloted co-management initiative gave women user rights and recognition over buffer zone resources, strengthened the park management practices, engaged women directly in decision making, and women asserted their needs, were able to assert their needs to continue fishing and collecting clams and help protect mangrove forests. So a number of co-benefits. And then also in the area of promoting marine protected area policy, in terms of working together to establish marine protected areas and locally managed marine areas. Examples of policy influence are that the government of Vietnam has actually adopted the MFF. Initially, I would say WCP had developed MFF adapted management effectiveness evaluation methodology to strengthen marine protected area management, helped communities and MPA authorities to develop LLMA plans in Vietnam and Myanmar now, and developing MPA frameworks helped countries such as Bangladesh, Pakistan, Cambodia, and Myanmar to develop MPA frameworks, and also in terms of strengthening research and capacity development on MPA. Another area, because MFF has a strong focus on private sector engagement, is on promoting sustainable coastal tourism policy. MFF has engaged with a number of private sector partners across the region and across MFF countries. And in Vietnam in specific, it has actually developed a long-term tourism strategy for Cam Than province and raised awareness on the sustainable use of wetlands and building capacity. And it has also facilitated intergovernmental and multi-stakeholder dialogue among MFF countries on collaboration on transboundary management of shared marine and coastal resources. Examples of these being science-based India and Sri Lanka collaboration on the Gulf of Mannar, which is very important breeding, important habitat for the dugong. Based on lessons learned from Vietnam, China is actually replicating some of MFF's models in the adjoining provinces of Guangxi, which adjoins a province in Vietnam. And there are other possibilities that are being explored. Thank you very much.
So Radhika, I'm in your hands. We'll wait. How long have you got?
5 to 7 minutes.
5 to 7 minutes. Okay. Okay, so let's maybe if we could get Lillian Pelle and Anshuman up again. We'll just take some questions. A couple of things jumped out at me. It was actually really the scale of loss. I mean, we were talking about economic loss at national level and the scale. Hundreds of millions, at least sometimes billions, with people affected in the tens of millions. I think one thing that came up very strongly was also this real importance of positioning EcoDRR as a strong demand, from its strong demand response perspective, and really sort of positioning it against national priorities. And I think one point that I think particularly Pelle brought out was it's not just a question of the increasing frequency of events, it's actually the hazard exposure and the vulnerability. So maybe we can take some questions. I said, we did say we would try and deal with this issue of integration with IUCN's knowledge base. So I hope we'd be able to deal with that. Let's just take a couple of questions because we only have got 5 minutes. So I'll take all the questions at once, and then so one question over here. Anybody else? Okay, right.
Shall I go ahead? Or?
Yes, please go ahead.
So I'm David Ujoki from IISD, the International Institute for Sustainable Development. And my question is, have you seen any examples in your countries, nature-based solutions being implemented in the planning and design of green infrastructure, such as roads and buildings, to actually these projects?
Okay, who wants to start off?
If I
Yeah,
respond to that, I think the one country that I can think of, which is not part of our assessment, but is one of the champions of EcoDRR, is Japan. Which after the Sendai earthquake, when it basically developed its plans for restoration, included the Sanriku-Fuku National Park as part of its overall redevelopment process, as well as combined it with grey infrastructure, structural features as well. And I think Naosam here might be able to probably provide more information on that.
Anything else?
There are very few examples of that in SRO. There's one that we've been, or there's several, but one in Durban that we've been in contact with and discussed their procedures there. But I mean, South Africa is a bit different to the other countries, so it's not a very good example either.
Lillian?
In the Pacific, there's not actually a good example as well, but what we're starting to see is in these tourism projects, especially building of new complexes, they're starting to integrate it, and it's more to do with attracting people to come because of the the ways designed to incorporate a lot of what the natural environment is like. But as per designing it in such a way, like I said earlier, it's very new in the region, and it's something that we need to do a lot of work to promote.
Although I suppose one thing where you could look at it is actually it's not, and again I think we've heard messages from all the presenters, is that actually if you look at if one drills a little deeper into traditional cultural practices, you actually do see the essence of eco-DRR, and I think this is the issue of not getting too hung up with the terminology. We present it as something completely brand new, as something, yeah. But the very fact is you've got pastoralism. Pastoral systems are actually replete with eco-DRI. They actually build in mechanisms for that. I think actually then more certainly, I know definitely in Northwest Europe there are several examples now, very deliberate examples of coastal realignment, reflooding of wetlands, ecological approaches to reduce the rate of water flow and reduce flooding. So there are several examples as well, and we've documented some of those in the Nature-Based Solutions book. Any other questions? Ed?
Well, we're engaging much more with the disaster risk community, who is not the environmental community. What lessons are you learning from that engagement? This is very much not our normal clientele.
Well, I can ask, I'm a civil engineer, so I know exactly what they're talking about, and this is more looking at it from a different angle from my perspective since I joined IUCN. So in that sense, I feel at home there, and that's just the challenge of for them to see that this is not just about excluding grey infrastructure completely, as you said, Ed. It's the combination and trying to find out where we can go with green infrastructure and where we need combinations and where we need only grey infrastructure. So, yeah.
Anshuman or Lillian, what are your...
I think in the case of Asia, because there have been such frequent occurrence of natural hazards and disasters that have happened, they are very much aware and understand the need to actually look at the natural features and look at the role of ecosystems. That's what we learned. And in fact, if you look at it, Japan championed the Sendai framework. And then at our Asian Ministerial Conference side event, we had the Vietnam Vice Minister, who we never expected was the head of delegation, who attended an entire day of the workshop and expressed their commitment. So there seems to be because I think they're at the forefront of climate change and disasters, they probably recognize the links more. At the same time, we didn't have anybody from the government of India who came, because they probably didn't recognize that. Even though the workshop was in India, we didn't have anybody who came from the government of India.
And Lillian, maybe the final word to you.
I think Radhika did mention it in the workshop, how one of the participants in the meeting was actually an NDMO himself. He had been doing that job for the last 15 years, and he attended the workshop with the thinking that he would just be there for the first 1 or 2 presentations and then leave. But he ended up staying for the whole 3 days and then came up with a lot of examples on how they could work together, and something that he would take back and start working to collaborate with other sectors. So something with those, that kind of knowledge that he's gained then, which is important too.
Okay, thanks. Maybe I'll just wrap up by saying, and maybe come back to this question of sort of where really are the examples. I mean, I think the other thing is as well, I think there has been, and this was a message, there's a lot of practices out there that we don't call eco-DRR, but actually demonstrate the basic principles, particularly this idea of deploying a multifunctional asset, i.e. ecosystems, to solve multiple problems. I think the other thing is, though, maybe now actually sort of more formally where something is badged or labelled eco-DRR, I think we may struggle to find fewer deliberately badged examples of eco-DRR, but they are there, and I think the interesting thing is it's global as well. You see this in Europe. There's some very interesting traction in Europe as well as in Latin America, Asia, Africa. And finally, I think that there was another point actually, I think, Lillian, that you brought up, and it's really worthwhile highlighting as well. Again, emphasizing this importance of being demand responsive. The hooks are out there already. There are regional, some, and certainly increasing number of national policy hooks. And we actually don't have to look very much further than the nationally determined contributions to UNFCCC. Sandeep, I think we estimated, what, 69, is it?
Yeah, the whole, I mean, if you look at it from the framing of nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based measures.
So that doesn't, yeah, thanks, Sandy. So that doesn't mean that our work's done. In fact, what it is, it's just saying our work's actually started. And finally, I'd just like to thank the panelists. I think it's really rich actually having that breadth of regional experience. Some of the commonalities, is also some of the different challenges. And I'd like to thank them not only for their presentations, but actually for the really solid work that has been done over the last 5 or 6 years, yeah, on driving this through and taking this idea, on really capturing this as a concept and starting to get this mainstreamed. And of course, I'd like to thank Radhika and her team as well as Ed, who's headed up the ecosystem management program on that. So maybe we could give everyone a round warm applause. Okay, thanks.
Like your own example.